Dr. Kornbluth,
Yes.
at MIT, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate MIT's code of conduct or rules regarding bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
If targeted at individuals, not making public statements.
Yes or no? Calling for the genocide of Jews does not constitute bullying and harassment?
I have not heard calling for the genocide for Jews on our campus.
The state of higher education in America is in an absolutely horrible condition. And in my opinion, I believe, given the facts of the moment, that it is 100% irredeemable. And as a former college student myself, I was a college student just about 3 or 4 years ago, as the posting of this video, I have seen many of the effects of this horrible condition of higher education for myself. But this didn't begin 10 years ago. This didn't begin 20 years ago. This didn't begin 5 years ago. This didn't begin after the George Floyd riots or after the rise of BLM or after the induction of wokeness into the public square. No. All of those incidences in history are merely downstream of the broader cause. This didn't even begin with the Frankfurt School that many people would actually say this began with. No. This began with the wholesale invasion of European ideas onto the shores of America, brought to us by Americans, who then use those ideas to fundamentally alter the character and shape of American education. And before I tell you why I believe that the higher education system in our country is irredeemable, before I tell you why the censorious nature of so many student groups on campuses that shut down opposing views, before I tell you why the mealy-mouthed moral social agnosticism, which cannot condemn evil for what it is, that comes from so many university presences, before I tell you why so many students who are saddled in debt can never seem to escape outside of the limiting premises that the university system promises them. You go to college, you get a good job, and you go ahead and you have some decent life paying off debt over your whole life. Before I tell you why I think the subsidization of the system by the government is bad, before I tell you any of that, we have to understand what the root of the problem is, because if we don't, we will never be able to fix it. We will be tilting at windmills, continuously trying to whack the mole and get rid of the problem. But if you don't look at the origins, if you don't study the problem, the solution for the problem will elude you. That's how we shall begin in today's video. Let me take you back to the year 1835, the 19th century United States of America. In 1835, the condition of the American education system is relatively decentralized. In fact, the American education system in 1835 was largely privatized, localized, controlled, and directed by communities and individuals within those communities, or by, indeed, the churches. And this system is what's known in the history of education as traditional education. Now, many of you may be familiar with John Dewey, who was the sort of villain of modern day public education, who basically created the concept. We'll get to Dewey in a second because he's not all that important. He's important, but he comes after the fact. So you have a decentralized system where the government is not involved whatsoever, where education decisions are largely made in local communities, made by the parents for their kids, and where, most importantly, education in many of those contexts was not concerned with social awareness or social consciousness. Education was actually wholly concerned with instilling universal moral principles into the kid and teaching them the basics of topics that were of import to general life, not teaching them how to be activists, not teaching them how to be a particular ideology. It was a largely value neutral, as we call it, framework. Well, around 1835, there was this work published in America that actually aroused awareness of a different kind of education system. And there was this work by Sarah Austin called The Report on the State of Public Education in Prussia, which was originally prepared for the French public minister of ecclesiastical affairs. And in Prussia, which is now modern-day Germany, the education system there was actually centralized. Not only was it centralized, but it was very clear that the education system, according to many of its proponents and reformers, existed for the sole benefit of the government. It existed to ensure that society could be managed and run in a certain way. Now, this wouldn't be so concerning, and this would have no relevance if some of the most seminal figures in the history of American education did not all go over to Germany, study their system, and then come back to our country and implement that wretched, old world, status-based, immoral system into our institutions. I'll name them too. We're naming names tonight. I'll name them for you. The following individuals, this is just not even an exhaustive list, but the following individuals, who some of you who understand the history of education may recognize, went over to Germany, studied their system, and then went back over to America and created what has become the modern university. Daniel Colt Gilman, who was the first president of Johns Hopkins University and the second president of UC Berkeley in California. Charles William Eliot, who was at Harvard. William Rainey Harper, who was at Chicago. Henry Tappan. Now, Henry Tappan was the first president of the University of Michigan. The University of Michigan, which is Michigan's largest university and its flagship university, is known for being the first research university in America built on the European Prussian model. Daniel Gilman is known for creating the first postgraduate university based on the European model and all that in between. In fact, Henry Tappan actually wrote in defense of a centralized model of education where the government funds it and the government controls it. All these individuals, and this is even weirder. The entire faculty of Johns Hopkins University, the entire faculty in 1876 went to Europe, studied in Germany, then came back and implemented their ideas in that university. Johns Hopkins is now one of the top universities, medical universities in the world, most certainly in the country. And it was founded with rather horrible and fundamentally anti-American ideas. That should concern all of you. The fact that this is the top university and it's literally being generated by ideas that defy the ethos of America. So we can say that they went and studied in Germany, but many people don't actually know what they went to study. Well, all these people went to study the writings and the works primarily of William von Humboldt, whose idea of Wissenschaft, hope I'm saying that German word right, came to define what the modern university in America would mean, and it defined basically what the university in Germany meant. And Wissenschaft, excuse me, I'm probably butchering that, but it's all right, basically means that education exists for the sake of knowledge. The university exists for the sake of knowledge and for nothing else. The German model of education divorces the relationship between the teacher and their student and then places that relationship instead in a floating abstract idea which says the teacher exists to be a scholar, the teacher exists to produce knowledge. Now, where have you heard the word knowledge production at? That's actually a mantra of the woke. We have to produce knowledge to beat all these cultural ills. Well, you don't produce knowledge. Knowledge exists out there in the world, and you obtain knowledge by a rational appraisal of reality, and you extract it from reality, and then you implement it into whatever you're trying to do. But knowledge that exists for the sake of itself is not really anything practical. It's high abstract. And this is actually where the idea of the ivory tower comes from. It's Wissenschaft. Many folks don't have the sophistication to know that, because many of us don't really, in all reality, when it comes to education, you shouldn't have to read all these obscure things. But this is the stuff that actually defines why what is happening in our nation, in our education system, is actually happening. And there were other principles that the Humboldtian vision of education followed. But this idea of Wissenschaft is not some obscure idea. The presidents of universities have quoted this very idea in their commencement speeches throughout the year. I think the latest instance was in 2012, and this has influenced the structure and the shape of the modern university. And so when the modern university is based on this idea of Wissenschaft, It's based on this idea, and Humboldt, and the thing about Humboldt, is that he believed in the idea of academic freedom. And academic freedom is actually quite integral to his philosophy, but not because he believed that ideas are best when they are free of external influences. He believed that academic freedom was a means for scholars, a means for university professors to develop their ideas so that they could use them to benefit the government and to benefit the collective in society. In fact, he went before King Frederick Wilhelm, according to an academic source, and he basically said that the endless pursuit of knowledge, I'm quoting, could only be guaranteed by the state, and if the state wanted useful knowledge, it would do best to allow scholars their academic freedom. And this source goes on to say that for Humboldt, universities should be of use to the state and the broader public, but never immediately so. Scholars need time and space to pursue knowledge that might one day be of use beyond the university. So basically, for Humboldt, this is the man who influenced basically the entire modern university and the entire education system in America. For Humboldt, the university exists just to produce knowledge that would eventually be used by the state for whatever purposes it want. So in other words, for him, the pursuit of knowledge was not based in any external value of truth. It was based and is based solely in politics, based solely in utility. This is eventually what became known as progressive education in America, where John Dewey comes in. And John Dewey says that the problem with the traditional education system in America, which emphasizes universal moral values and value neutrality, is that it doesn't focus enough on the society. And John Dewey says that the child education should focus on the orientation and the condition of the society, and he should be educated up into that environment. So the emphasis went away from the self-betterment of the child towards making the child a sort of willing receptacle for whatever society wanted. This is the idea of social consciousness in education. And then in America, the progressive era reformers took this idea, and several very well-known people in this era of the progressive era, developed these educational theories, which basically brought shape to the modern-day education system, and in my opinion, is responsible for a lot of the nonsense that we see in this system. So what are some of the problems with this, obviously? Well, I think one of the problems with modern universities that make them irredeemable, that come right from this foul philosophical origin from Germany, is that they are based almost entirely on status. Remember, the status of universities in Germany was to appease the king, to appease the collective, to appease the government. Well, the status of a lot of universities in America, especially the so-called research universities, is to produce as much work as possible so that the professors can then get tenure as a result of status, and then so that that tenured professor can produce some work that will eventually be cited by that person or this person, and that will lift up the name of the university in the minds of the people of that society, and that will make them consequential. Status is one of the modern drivers of the modern day German influence American university. And research and status, which take away the focus from the kid and go towards more broad abstract ideas that you can't really measure, that are just there, that you're endlessly pursuing, does nothing more than make universities a poor man's idea of what it actually means to educate people. Based on the foundations of modern American universities, the goal is not to build the man. The goal is not to help people think clearly about moral issues. The goal is not to teach about subjects. The goal is just to sit, talk, produce knowledge, which makes me sick, produce knowledge, get it out there in the world, have someone praise it, and repeat the cycle. So is it any wonder that a modern university system, based on appeasing the government, based on getting status, will enter into compacts with the government, subsidizing their expenses in the form of student loans, in the form of Pell Grants, and then, conversely, jack up the prices for the students, build all these new things, fund all these research projects, and not actually be focused on the development, the ethical, the moral, the intellectual development of the student. Because it all goes back to status, it all goes back to a fealty towards some broad abstract force, and it all goes back to the divorce of the relationship between the student and the professor. It doesn't exist in the modern American university. This system quite literally rejects that wholesale. This is the origin point of so many issues. This is why the idea of academic freedom, which is what you've seen a lot of people, you've seen university presidents justify how a lot of professors have dealt with the issue of antisemitism over the course of the October 7th attacks and beyond. And by the way, regardless of what you feel about that issue, one way about the Israel-Palestine conflict, that's separate from this video. What I'm saying is academic freedom has been used as a tool to justify some of the most illogical, irrational, and immoral kind of behavior. Like, for example, insulting Jewish students by saying they're colonizers. For example, entertaining the idea that all white people are racist and that white people will benefit from their whiteness or whatever. All kinds of bad ideas have come from the idea of academic freedom. But for the professor who has the freedom to pursue nonsense and the freedom to restrict the voices of the kids in class by superimposing their nonsense upon them, and through the tenure system having protection from on high to keep imposing their nonsense forcibly upon the kids, academic freedom is a tool to intellectually tyrannical ends. I'm not saying we need to have some minder in the classroom judging what the professors say, but I'm saying that the idea of freedom has been necromantized, bastardized, and used as a tool to allow destructive ideas that actually go against the ethos of freedom, which is simply the restraint from undue action upon the individual, and seeks to impose a kind of tyranny. And yet that academic freedom was essential to Wissenschaft because it benefited the aims of the state and the aims of knowledge production. The modern American university is founded on utilitarianism. The student loan subsidization problem, which jacks up costs for students and settles them in debt that they'll be a slave to their whole life, is downstream of this disregard for students' well-being and this care more for research. I had a professor in college, nice lady, nice person. I had several professors, nice men and women. They were more worried about research. They were more worried about writing papers, presenting papers. There were times where they were gone for whole weeks because their focus was on writing papers and presenting papers and not on educating the souls of the students. Because that's the rat race. It's not about learning. It's about status. It's not about achievement. It's about an overall mentality about what makes someone legitimate. That's what it's about. Now, we also have to understand there are a lot of practical issues with this kind of system. We've seen the Confucius Institutes in America, throughout America, be set up in the universities. And they use this attraction to status and this desire to succeed in the rat race to convince these universities to allow these Confucius Institutes to have cooperation partnerships with them, which then allows foreign influences to come in and fund subversive programs that spy on Americans, that try to influence the course of our students' knowledge, and direct them towards aims that are beneficial for the Communist Chinese Party. And don't think that it's just China doing this. Almost every nation in the world has some kind of intelligence program that seeks to direct the course of events in America towards a particular end. Most of those intelligence programs may not focus on universities, but China's absolutely does. That's absolutely their entire deal. And so this makes universities vulnerable, not just to the anti-American ideas they're founded upon, but to ideas from foreign actors that can squirm into the university and manipulate it towards its ends. Now look at graduate schools, for example. Graduate schools, their emphasis is, again, on research and output. One of the reasons why I didn't go to grad school, because I had several people in my life saying, Christian, go to grad school, go to law school, do all that stuff. I said no. I'm like, no, thank you. Like, well, why not, Christian? You're smart. No, why not? I'm smarter for not getting involved in a rat race that'll leave me saddled in debt and leave me trying to get status for the rest of my life, trying to get tenure for the rest of my life. Why would I want to go to a place like that? Well, I want to go to a place where there's an advisor that tells me what to think, how to write, what to do. Far too many people conflate the academia with intelligence. When, as I mentioned, academia is a power-seeking game at the expense of the student. It's not an actual pursuit of ideas. That's the ideal. That's the map. Look at the rough terrain of reality. It says a very different picture. And so, in graduate school, there's there's a big emphasis, at least in philosophy, on research, putting out papers, getting published in a particular academic journal, presenting at conferences, and it's all towards this idea of creating more knowledge, producing more knowledge, except, and a graduate student will tell you this, one of the biggest challenges that kids in graduate school have is that everything's already been said. So they have to find a way to make an original assertion about some random obscure issue and some random obscure topic that no one except their advisor and maybe 5 other people are going to read, and they're supposed to be satisfied with this in their soul because they're doing research. No, you are bound to a system that doesn't care about knowledge. It cares about appearances, and it uses those appearances to squirm its way towards a position of status, and through that gain legitimacy to the uneducated in society who think that going to Harvard is impressive. It's not impressive. It's not impressive. But that's how the system runs. Knowledge is a commodity for advancement, not a means to seek the truth. This is the major flaw of the modern day Prussian-influenced American university, is that it can't conceptualize knowledge as a means to seek the truth. It can't conceptualize knowledge as a means to build up the individual person with an understanding of reality. It can only conceptualize knowledge as a means to produce itself and therefore be in an endless loop of incoherency that never ends. Because if it ever ended, if there ever was a conclusion to an academic's job, there wouldn't be any universities for a permanent period of time. It's a business model that is quite literally divorced from what it claims to do. It is fraud. American universities are founded on a fraudulent idea. That's the truth. It's the 100% truth. Intellectual virtue is not prized. Advancement is prized. The higher education system is a self-contained system of norms, rules, and behaviors that all affirm themselves but never actually do anything for the broader society, except in those rare cases where politics and education commingle. And what happens then? We've seen what happens then in many cases. The Defense Department invests a lot of money to get universities to produce research for them, to make them look a certain way, to make them achieve certain ends. We see what happens when politics. We have lawyers going into government, using their rhetorical skills to sell us a bad bill of goods that has really placed America in a horrible place. Think about this. Most of Congress is lawyers. There are very few civic politicians out there. Most of Congress is lawyers. What happens is, when politics becomes the end of education, education is not actually education. It's a counterfeit idea masquerading as education, which produces a different outcome than what education is supposed to produce. That's the flaw of the American university system. And in a system that is not concerned about the pursuit of truth, censorship becomes a necessity. In a system that is not concerned with the well-being of the student, saddling them with debt slavery becomes almost a foregone conclusion. In a system that is not concerned about the pursuit of truth, justifying or trying not to make it have a morally convicted stance, because you know that moral conviction comes from truth, on the cause to genocide the group of people, those things become acceptable. In a system that is married to politics, either through principal statement, as I've examined for you, or either through convenience to get the university to have more money, like a business, you can't really be focused on what you're actually supposed to be focused for. You will be focused on the norms of power, and you will adapt yourself to them. In a system where it is profitable to sell someone a useless degree in the name of producing knowledge that has no practical application, you should expect to have gender studies majors, even philosophy majors, and others on the streets, or as is the case of most PhDs, saddled in debt working 2 or 3 jobs. Most PhDs are not doing well financially. They have too much debt. They went to grad school, took someone's advice, now they're in debt for the rest of their life. All of this is downstream from the poison of the Prussian system that has snaked its way into the American university system. Now, I'll be honest. There are private schools. Yes, not all schools are public, but even many of the private schools in America are influenced by Wissenschaft. They're influenced by the Prussian system, so they too have been infected. Higher education is 100% irredeemable, but it doesn't have to be. We can right the course by encouraging a return to practicality and common sense in the way that we encourage our students in America to pursue excellence, in the way that we encourage our students in America to pursue good skills. We can get away from things like affirmative action, which once again are part of this broader thing of status, and more towards building up excellence in people by looking at who they are as an individual and investing in that, as opposed to investing in an abstraction that has nothing to do with them. Everything to do with the existence of the institution. Higher education is irredeemable, yes, but I have news for you. The moment Americans stand up, use their voices and their powers of reason to rebuke the European virus that has entered our system, is the moment I believe that we can begin emphasizing on the correct course that will tear the system down and that will allow a new one to come from the ashes that is localized, focused on individual pursuits and desires, not on the desires of some old world notions of going to college and getting a job. And that will 100% not only enhance society, but enhance the lives of the individuals in this society who are being sold a bad bill of goods by the old generations on the practicality of college. As a 23-year-old college graduate, I say to myself that I am so happy I avoided the pitfalls that so many people my age happen to get into. My friends, support me, like this video, comment on this video, share this video, subscribe to my channel, donate to me. I have so many places you can donate to me at. It's all in the comment section down below. Join my Discord, which is also in the comment section down below. My friends, I love you guys so much, and please, please, please study history, study philosophy, and most importantly, stay pensive. Bye, everyone.